Hello, welcome to the Sideboard here at Grand Prix Miami. I'm Nick Miller alongside Andrew Boswell. How you doing today?
Nice to see you again, friend.
Yep. You're a man who likes to beat down, and you've been playing an Abzan aggro list for quite a while. 7-0 here at GP Miami with a lower to the ground build than most. People have seen the build that go up to like Wingmate Rock and have Elspeth. You say none of that. What are you doing here?
So one of the big advantages of my deck is I'm lower to the ground than a lot of the other decks, but all of my cards are just as good as theirs. It's just they pay more mana for them. Mm-hmm. So I get to spend all of my early mana putting power and toughness on the ground. Like by turn 3, there's like no other deck that gets to have more power and toughness than me. And then, all of a sudden they're like, wow, I need to start playing removal spells instead of like my proactive game. And they're just treading water because my deck is just all fat.
Yeah.
And all of my threats are really, really good against control, but they're also really, really good blockers against like the red-white aggro deck.
Right.
So like you're extremely threat dense against the control decks, and you're extremely answer dense versus the aggro decks. So whatever you need, you got like a lot of it.
Right, I've seen you kind of evolve this deck over the Open Series for a couple of months now. You've tried out stuff with Soldier of the Pantheon and Warden of the First Tree. This build, you've taken out the Soldiers, but you still got Warden, for those, 4 Death Dealers, 4 Fleecemane. So you're just fast to the ground, punishing these people with all their tap lands and their slow mid-range decks.
And I mean, like a lot of times, even all of like opponents where they're just like turn 2 removal, turn 3 removal, turn 4 removal, and I still just kill them.
Right.
And it's a really big problem for any deck trying to play removal, because any one of my threats can get completely out of hand. It's like a lot of times you look at a deck like this and you're like, yeah, Boon Satyr will never be a 2-for-1.
Right.
Warden of the First Tree will like never become an 8/8, Brimaz is never going to get that out of control. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, since every single one of my creatures can get out of control, it like if they just don't kill one of them, they're just in rough shape.
Everything is must answer. They're not going to have that many answers. Now, you have stuff like Anafenza, and Brimaz is a new addition as well. You didn't have 3 of those guys before, but now you're really packing the 3/4s.
Yeah, basically, I thought, like for the Open that I top 8'd, where I had the Soldier of the Pantheons, I thought that Abzan aggro would just be obvious best deck, everyone would play it. I don't know what other people are thinking. So I thought Soldier of the Pantheon would just be great in the mirror. So I really wanted to have it. But things haven't worked out that way. People just haven't caught on to the deck for some reason. And Brimaz is a more well-rounded card where, there's a lot of like 1/1 tokens running around. And having Soldier of the Pantheon in those situations is like a little embarrassing.
Right, it's sort of like the Abzan's own Rabblemaster. You get your value when you get to attack with it. You have another threat. Then you get to do stuff like bestow Boon Satyr onto your tokens.
Yeah. Actually, just last weekend, I had a really fun match in like the Star City Premier IQ that happened after the Modern Open.
Another top 8.
Yeah, and I'd like Boon Satyr sometimes just overperforms so much. I have so much fun with the card. Like I attacked with Brimaz. He had a Goblin Rabblemaster. He blocks my 1/1 token with his Rabblemaster, and I'm just like, bestow Boon Satyr. And he just loses his Rabblemaster. And I've got this 5/3 Vigilance token. It's like red-white aggro deck can't really get through that. And so he had to Lightning Strike it, but then he still had this Boon Satyr that was attacking for 4, and it was just the full 3-for-1. That's insane.
Yeah, that's a ton of value off the old Boon Satyr.
Yeah,
who shined quite a bit back in the day with green-white aggro, another deck you're very familiar with.
Yeah. I definitely get a lot out of the fact that I'm usually one of the only people in the room playing the card, and it's just frequently a blowout. I mean, sometimes it's just like my green hero's downfall. Sometimes it's my green Stormbreath Dragon. Like a lot of the other people are playing Wingmate Rock instead of Boon Satyr. And Wingmate Rock, like if you just look at the card, it's like a better card.
Right.
But in this deck, like you really want to like play your 4-drop, attack with all of your mana open, and use it for stuff. Like when people play Wingmate Rock, you see them all the time like, all right, I'll attack with my Fleecemane Lion, and they're like, block, and they're like, all right, my Fleecemane Lion's dead, post-combat, play Wingmate Rock with a Raid Trigger, and that's just like, pretty bad. And you have so many mana sinks in the deck that you really don't need a big expensive spell. Like you just want to go 1-drop, 2-drop, you just want to curve out, and having Wingmate Rock in your opening hand can clog that up. So Boon Satyr, you can play it early. It doesn't overcommit you to a sweeper, which is important because Wingmate Rock does overcommit you to a sweeper. and it's just you can get value out of it like you can Wingmate Rock. You can use it to close the game out like Wingmate Rock, but it doesn't have to be a 5-drop.
Doesn't clunk up your hand as much.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, you got Siege Rhino. Nobody's playing Abzan without that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually a secret Siege Rhino hater. Similar to how in the green-white aggro deck, towards the end of it, I ended up putting the Advent of the Worms on the sideboard. Like, I really just want to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, removal spell, removal spell, removal spell. And but everyone's playing just so much removal that it's just better to go 1-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop.
You're going to hit your land and be able to play it eventually when they just try to kill all your stuff.
Yeah. And speaking of the lands, I actually moved up to 25 lands. So even though my curve is actually pretty low, I have 25 lands, which is what a lot of the other Abzan decks are playing that have a much higher curve. But that's important because you really want to just keep any land that has a 1 or 2-drop, and you want to hit all your land drops. A lot of your stuff is like pretty mana intensive, and you have all of these good mana sinks. So you just get to play this game where your curve is low, your creatures stay relevant into the late game because you have all of these mana sinks, and you just don't really flood out.
Yeah.
So
you get to sink your mana into Warden of the First Tree, Death Dealer, you get a Monstrous Fleece Main Lion, and you have a Tasigur in here as well.
Yeah.
Might even get some value off that guy.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean he's like the best last card to have in your hand when you're exchanging a lot of blows.
Your removal suite, you've got 4 Downfall, 3 Valor Stance, and 1 Abzan Charm.
Yeah, basically your threats are just better than other people's. So all you have to do is answer just the top of their top end, and you just run over everything else.
Okay.
Like, it's just, when you have just like a bunch of big creatures and they have a bunch of small creatures, like you just don't need removal spells.
Right, there's no need to waste removal. They're just going to have to chump away.
Yeah, I'll just play another big creature that you have to chump off.
You don't have stuff like Bioblight in here, so you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, well, I had Bioblight at that last open, and it's a pretty good card, but you run into a lot of situations where you have Bioblight and you have to like use it in combat to be a removal spell, and you just rather be pushing damage. Also, I have the 3 Drown in Sorrows in my sideboard, and it's just like particularly against the red or white aggro deck, you don't really want to go removal spell, removal spell, removal spell, removal spell, because just if your removal ends up being awkward for any moment, you're probably going to die. Like if you have Bioblight in your hand and they just have Stormbreath Dragon, it's like, well, that's really bad. So basically, when I realized that Bioblight was underperforming in that matchup, like all I want to do is just clog up the board with my creatures, downfall their dragon, and then Drown in Sorrow like every other creature they have. And Bioblight, I always just wished it was a Fleecemane Lion or some other creature.
Right. So just take them out, put more guys in, continue to beat down.
Yeah.
So your sideboard has the 3 Drown in Sorrow, as you mentioned. You also got a Murder's Cut here as like your other kill anything card.
Yeah, it's good against like the green Devotion decks or the blue-white Heroic decks where you kind of want to overload on removal.
Yeah. You've got 3 Nissa and 4 Thoughtseize as like your anti-control package.
Yeah, they've been, the Nissas in particular are really, really, really good against the like blue-black control deck, which has been doing really well. They just can't really deal with a Nissa very well. Ugin doesn't really deal with it. Sweepers don't really deal with it. It's always going to be a 2-for-1. And like you're playing all these other creatures that are really powerful and must answers, so they really have to spend every single removal spell they have. So if they just like miss a beat for 1 second and Nissa comes down, it's really hard for them to deal with it.
Right, if they use a removal picking off your creatures and you land a Nissa, you just have a flow of more creatures that they're just not going to be able to deal with.
It's also actually really good against the Abzan control deck, which may be a little counterintuitive, but basically if you just keep Siege Rhino and Tasigur off the field, they just have nothing that can really block Nissa. Like if you play Nissa before Elspeth, Nissa just beats it. Like it runs over coursers, they have a lot of spot removal, but they just can't spot remove all of your lands. So it ends up being really good there too.
They run out of cards eventually.
Yeah.
Then you got 2 Glare Heresy, which is just probably, like I've talked with everyone, is just the best sideboard card in Standard right now.
It's really, really good. I mean, honestly, I feel like every single one of my sideboard cards is one of the best sideboard cards in Standard. It's like Nissa's the ultimate control killer. Drown in Sorrow is just insane against all the weenie decks. Glare of Heresy is just one of the most efficient removal spells for a lot of the best threats. And then to round it out, I have a Back to Nature, which is like, are you playing enchantments? Well, that's a bad idea on your part. So
yeah. All right, well then your sideboard's full of the best cards, your main deck's full of the best cards.
That's
so
what I think.
Best deck, obviously.
I mean, that's like honestly how I feel.
Yeah.
So,
Well, beat them until they learn from you. Otherwise,
Yeah.
thanks for sitting down with me on the sideboard.
appreciate it.
7-0 so far, Andy Boswell here at Grand Prix Miami. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com for all the action.